Hi DF crew. So straight to the point, is the PC now objectively the best platform for gaming? I'm not talking from a performance or image quality point of view, but games. PC has or is getting all of the top PlayStation exclusives, new PSVR maybe, and we already have all the Microsoft exclusives like Starfield. You can play more of the top tier exclusive games with this one platform than the other two individually. I love this bit. Let's brush over the high cost of entry and PC's never-ending shader compilation woes, please.
Hi.
John, what do you think?
I mean, he's not wrong these days.
Yeah, but he's putting a lot of, shall we say, caveats on that.
Well, yes, yeah. That's kind of the issue, right? Like, from my perspective, if you have access to a high-end PC, there's really nothing better right now. It is kind of like the best, but I also recognize that to get to that point is not cheap. You must spend a lot to reach that point. I think mid-range PC stuff is generally okay, but it does tend to feel like games can get a little bit more finicky on that kind of class of hardware in terms of just wanting a stable experience. And consoles are pretty good at just kind of working. And yeah. I'm not sure everybody wants to. So basically, if you can afford it, anybody can have a great time with a high-end PC because most games are just going to work, though not all, unfortunately. But if you're in the mid-range territory, you kind of need to do a little bit more legwork, I feel, to get a decent experience, and not everybody's going to want to do that. That's right. And and then there's stuff like, man, I guess you'd also consider that on the PC side, you could also add in, like, on top of the PC cost itself, you can add in something like a Steam Deck if you want the Switch, like, portable experience. And that's also pretty good, but it's not going to run everything, of course. Yeah. But for my money, I think all of these different platforms have different use cases. It really depends on what you're trying to do. And I think, for instance, if you have like a home theater setup or like a living room kind of setup, living room PCs are still not that good. I feel like the interface that you have to deal with is still not great. Steam Big Picture's pretty good, but you're still going to have to get into the PC side of things. And I don't feel like that works well in a lot of cases. So that's also not a one shot for everyone either. If you're playing at a desk though, or you don't mind having mouse and keyboard and zooming in and out of the different window sizes, like if you're using native 4K res with 100% font scaling in a living room, it's not going to be that pleasant to use, I would say. Okay. So there's things to consider.
Yeah. Okay, Alex.
Yeah. So I will say that I think actually the mid-range experience minus like a short like 3 to 5% of modern releases is like a really problematic thing. I think there's a lot of new features that have been added to the ecosystem of PC that allow for mid-range gaming to be perhaps better than it's ever been before. I think if you use GeForce Experience and or now the new GeForce app, which will come out, you're going to be able to get at least some level of optimized settings without even thinking. You could just literally hit the optimized button, and that'll cover all AAA releases. And that is actually a pretty good way to just plug and play a PC without caring. And I mean, if you're this already like not caring at all, like if you're to the point where I just want to plug and play a game, you also probably don't care about a lot of other sundry matters like that we would care about. So doing like these really quick click optimize all things is actually, I think, pretty reasonable for most users, but there needs to still, like, the fact that you need to acquire the PC. If you don't want to build it OEM, you're probably building it yourself. I think it's very easy to build a modern PC, as long as you read a guide online, and are just like a normal human being, pretty careful about holding expensive things in your hands, then it's pretty easy, I think. But that's just, these are things that you don't have to worry about at all on a console. So that is always something in favor of something that you literally just plug in and it doesn't play games immediately, as we talked before on a couple of weeks ago. There's like an online process. You have to have a player account. Some games have their own account system, etc. But it's a lot much quicker in that aspect in the PC. The one thing that I want to emphasize about PC that I think always goes by the wayside in these conversations is because people keep focusing on like big AAA exclusive experiences that are very console driven and weren't necessarily designed around the interface of a PC in the first place because they were originally console exclusive, is that the thing that makes PC gaming so rich for me is not at all those games. It's like the community driven stuff. It's the smaller games that don't make it to console, or if they do, they're very different experiences. Like I play a lot of real-time strategy games and stuff like that are just impossible to play on a console. So I feel like if you just corner PC into this, like we need to always compare it to consoles via exclusives, then you're kind of missing out a lot of the rich content that PC provides in the indie and or AA space, which is, I think, where actually real innovation beyond graphics is occurring currently. So I'd say yes, now is a time better than ever to be interested in PC gaming in terms of getting all those things that we didn't get in the mid 2000s or late 90s always. But that's not the experience that I think is the most compelling actually on PC anymore.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, Alex, because there's basically, a wider, more diverse selection of games. And, we've not even touched the whole esports thing, which isn't really a thing on consoles, but it's obviously like colossal on PC. So yeah, there is actually a lot in terms of content on the PC side that, just isn't really a thing on console. And that's in addition to the stuff you were talking about, which is obviously a plus point, so you are getting all the games and more in a sense. Yeah, let's talk about the other stuff that we've discussed here, like mid-range PCs, for example. Yeah, they are pretty easy to put together at this point because, not to put too fine a point on it, things only go in one way.
Yeah.
And they're all different socket types. It is quite easy. I think probably the most troublesome thing at the moment is probably CPU installation and getting the cooler installation right. But, if you're talking about a mid-range PC, you can't really go wrong there either.
There's some weird stuff that can crop up, though, that people may not expect. Like one of my last installations on my prior case, the cutout for the CPU block was shifted too far in one direction, and that motherboard specifically had the CPU in a weird spot. So when you put the two together, it didn't line up, so you couldn't actually attach the bracket necessary for the water cooling because you
had to do it all out of case.
So basically, like what I had to do to make it work was literally use metal cutters on the motherboard tray to remove a piece of that metal, because otherwise it would literally bump into the motherboard itself, which you don't want. So like things like that, like you don't really hear a lot of people talk about, but like just because there's not really there is technically a standard, but not everyone follows it to the letter. You can sometimes end up in these weird situations where you buy a bunch of parts and, oh geez, okay, this doesn't fit randomly for some reason. And there's just no obvious idea that's going to happen beforehand, right? And then you just have to get creative.
Yeah,
use metal cutters.
I've cut a case before too.
There's something else about the mid-range PC that I think is appealing. A couple of things. First of all, is that typically they aren't used in the living room, and the display types that are being used with them. I mean, the consoles are essentially like good GPUs from 2020 that are being asked to service 4K displays, which they achieve with varying levels of success. But PC wise, I guess 1440p is rapidly taking over as the sort of resolution of choice. And if you've got like an NVIDIA GPU, DLSS can do some really good stuff at 1440p that a console can't. So even a 3060 I'd say is actually a really good GPU for modern gaming, because the stress being put on it is much less than a console because of the DLSS situation. If you look back actually to the HP Omen sponsored video I did, which had like a 65 watt 4070, just through like careful husbandry of resources, you could achieve console-like results simply because you're not targeting a 4K display at the end of the day. And DLSS is actually proving to be quite good at upscaling from like 720p to 1440p.
Oh, it is.
Remarkably. Yeah. So, I think there is a lot to commend the PC experience, but I do think you need still to be an enthusiast to get the most enjoyment from it, because there is a lot of mucking about that you just don't get with a console. Although having said that, every time I turn on my Series X, which is like maybe once or twice a month, I have a new system software update which really annoys me.
Yeah, they really got to chill
They're really
out
hammering
with that.
it.
Or find a way to update it more quietly.
Yeah. So there's, but ultimately with a PC, you are in Windows. It is a computer for good and for bad. Another thing, of course, which we've got to talk about, beyond just the options that you have in game to tailor the experience, which you typically don't get on console, but weirdly, developers are being lauded for adding those sort of features now. Yeah, I mean, you've got the whole modding scene as well, where there's some just fantastic stuff. Don't like the borders in Hellblade. It's an easy mod to get rid of them. It's
really.
That's just one of like a billion examples. So yeah, I'd say there's a lot to commend the PC experience over the consoles. But you can't really, I love the way Never Ready Eddie is saying, let's brush over the high cost of entry and PC's never-ending shader compilation woes, because those are two really important things. But with that said, on the high cost of entry, what we're seeing now with the consoles effectively being so old and effectively having such weak CPUs is that I think the cost of entry, if you're looking for like a sort of low to medium spec PC, is actually lower than you might expect. You just have to tailor your expectations accordingly.
Right.
But yeah, I honestly think I'm going to check it out because I've got a board over there I've been sitting on for months. Core i3 quad core. I bought it for like £75, and I reckon paired with an Arc GPU rather, it would be pretty great. So yeah, I'm looking forward to doing that.
There's also one thing you can do with a PC that I always think is interesting. Not a lot of people talk about it because it's not the thing that, especially that this person talked about here, Never Ready Eddie, is that you can buy an under-spec'd PC. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but you can play the entire catalog of PC games since the 90s, more or less, on a very cheap machine. For example, you could play games from last gen consoles and back compat. You'd be getting that like same ballpark experience there. You could get like a GTX 1060 PC if you really wanted, really cheap these days, and just play thousands upon thousands of games. You wouldn't be playing the latest things, the greatest graphics, but
same thing applies to Steam Deck as well.
Yeah, Steam Deck is another great example of that. Could be more expensive depending upon which version of the Steam Deck you get, but you'd get a screen with it too, and an OS at that point. Although you can get Windows really cheap these days online. I do it that way.
Okay.